filling for the beef pie, savoury meat pie, I have half an onion because my onion is quite large, 250 grams of minced beef, I've got 1 carrot and a couple of mushrooms and a beef stock cube. And I'm going to start with the vegetables and make sure that I have all the vegetables prepared before anything else. So the carrot, I'm just going to peel that onto paper towel, a bowl, a plate, but keep the rubbish separate, and I'm just going to take both ends off the carrot ready to go. The mushrooms, as these are field mushrooms, they're the large open ones, I'm going to keep the stalk, but I am going to peel these. If you've got closed cap mushrooms, the small white ones, the button mushrooms, you can just wipe those over. But I'm just going to peel my mushrooms for a minute, and I don't mind eating the stalk of mushrooms, so I'm keeping the stalk in there. So I'm going to peel first all of the vegetables, and then I can get rid of all the rubbish in one go. So the last thing to be peeled is the onion. It's already been cut in half, and I am just going to take off one layer so that I've got rid of all the dry outside skin from the onion, and then I am going to cut the growing end and leave myself the root end on. So to do my onion, bridge hold down between your fingers, not quite cutting to the end of the onion, so that when I've finished doing this, my onion still holds together, I can move it. And then normally I would do bridge hold claw grip that way round, but if I do it this way round, you can see claw grip across the onion, and you get your nice small pieces of chopped onion. When you get quite close to your fingers, you can, if you wish, put the onion flat and just chop the last couple of bits of onion off to just leave yourself with the root. So my onion is prepared. The carrot I am going to slice thinly so that it will cook more quickly, so make sure that you do slice your carrot quite thinly. You can use 2 carrots, this one was quite large, so I'm just going to slice like that, and I will finish slicing that in a minute. And the mushrooms I'm just going to cut into slices, and it is entirely up to you how big you leave your mushrooms, but I like these to be quite small. I know they will shrink, and then I'm going to cut these across as they are field mushrooms, and I will just chop the stalks a little bit. So you need to prepare all of your vegetables first before you move to your cooker to cook the meat. Okay, for the filling for the meat pie, the savoury meat pie, I've got my mince in a saucepan, and I'm going to cook that on its own without adding any extra fat. By on its own, I don't mean I'm not going to put the vegetables in. So to make sure that the vegetables are cooked through, I'm going to add my chopped onion, and because they take a long time to cook, I'm also going to put in my sliced carrot. So I'm not adding the mushrooms yet, and I also have some flour and a stock cube. But to start off with, I just want to break the meat up and turn it over until the meat is completely browned. As it starts to cook, what I'm doing is dry frying the meat, which means I've not added any extra fat to it to start with, and it's going to cook through in its own fat. So as the meat starts to brown, it will release its own juice and fat, and that will help to start cooking the onion and the carrot. So you just need to keep breaking this up and stirring it until the meat has completely browned. Okay, the meat is now browned, so I'm stirring this up and all the meat is browned, and the onion is starting to change colour. So what I'm going to do now is just turn the heat down a little bit, put the lid on this pan and leave that to cook for 3 to 4 minutes in its own juice. So I just need that to keep cooking through. That will help to make sure that the onion and the carrot are completely cooked when I've put them inside the pie. Okay, right. The meat has been cooking for 3 to 4 minutes, and as you can see, there is quite a lot of fat and juice that's come out of it. So because this is for a meat pie and I want some gravy as well, I need to thicken this. So I'm adding 25 grams of plain flour, and this is going to make a brown roux. So a roux is when you cook equal amounts of fat and flour together to form the basis of your sauce, and a brown roux is often used to form the base of a gravy. What's important with this, if you wish to avoid lumps, is that you must keep stirring this until you can't see any white flour anywhere. If you leave any white flour, that's when you're going to get lumps in your sauce or your gravy. And I'm just going to add half a beef stock cube. You can add a whole beef stock cube if you wish to, but I don't like things to be too salty, so I'm just going to crumble in half a beef stock cube and stir that up, and you just give this a couple of minutes to cook. And then I am going to slowly add 375 mils of water, and same as I would if I was making any other type of sauce, I'm not going to add the liquid all in one go. I need that liquid to be absorbed evenly by the flour, and because I've got meat in here and sliced carrots and onion, the flour could be coating any of those, and I want to make sure that it's all the flour absorbs some of the liquid. So you can see it's starting to thicken already, so I'm going to add a bit more and turn the heat up because I need this to come up to the boil. So I need to get all of that water in there, and don't worry if it looks a little bit thin, because that will give you extra liquid to serve as gravy with your pie when your pie is cooked. So as soon as you think you're back to an even consistency, no lumps, you can add some more water, and I've managed to get mine in 3 goes. What I'm also going to add at this point, because it does not take anywhere near as long to cook as the carrots and the onions, I'm going to put my mushrooms in now as well. So just added all of my mushrooms, then I'm going to bring this up to the boil, and I'm going to just cook this for 10 minutes. And I realise that normally you would cook mince for a bit longer than that, but it has already had 5 minutes, before I added the liquid. It's still cooking while the liquid goes in, and of course it's going to cook in the oven inside the pastry. What I don't want is for my meat filling to be piping hot, boiling hot when I'm trying to fill my pies. So I'm going to give this just 10 minutes while I start making the pastry, and then I'm going to turn it off. So as soon as this comes back up to the boil, the lid will go on. It will need to be stirred occasionally, and I'm just going to time it for 10 minutes and leave that to cook. Okay, to make short crust pastry, you use half fat to flour. So in my bowl, as I am going to be making quite a large amount of pastry, I've got 400 grams of plain flour, 100 grams of white vegetable fat and 100 grams of butter. So I have half fat to flour. I have 200 grams of fat in total and 400 grams of flour. You can use all butter if you wish to. I like a little bit of white vegetable fat because it adds shortening to the pastry. And the first thing I'm going to do is just turn the lumps of fat that I've cut up. I'm just going to turn them over in the flour so that they are coated in flour to make it easier to rub in. Now, if I were going to be making some coconut tarts, I would only need possibly 100 grams of flour and just 50 grams in total of fat to make 12 little tart cases. It's entirely up to you how much you make. The process is the same. You need to put your hands together to make little scoops, and you scoop some flour, some fat into your hands, and you rub your thumbs over your fingertips. I normally do this with 2 hands, but you just pick up a little bit of fat and a little bit of flour and rub your thumbs over your fingertips. And the idea is that your fingertips are cooler than the rest of your hand. So as you rub, you will be keeping the mixture as cold as possible. We try to avoid getting the fat on the palms of your hands if you can, because that's where your hands are the hottest and where they will get the sweatiest. So if you just keep rubbing like this, you're going to rub the fat into the flour at the top of the bowl, but you're not going to actually get any of the mixture underneath. So if you put your fingers to scoops and go down to the bottom of your bowl and lift up, you should be able to turn the flour and the fat over as you go, making sure that you are always working in a different area or on a different section of the fat and the flour. And I'm working still, not using the whole of the bowl. I've missed that bit and I've missed that bit. So to turn my bowl, I'm just going to put my hands against the edges and give it a quarter turn. And keep rubbing in until this mixture looks like breadcrumbs, which means until there are no large lumps of fat left, and my flour will have changed colour from white to yellow as I work the margarine over the flour grains. So what you're doing when you're rubbing in is you are coating the individual flour grains in a layer of fat, which helps to stop them from absorbing water. And that is what makes your short crust pastry short. We don't want to allow the gluten in the flour to develop and make this pastry stretchy, which can happen if you add too much water later on. We want to coat all the flour grains in the fat and make a nice short pastry. So I'm just going to keep going with this until it's done. I just wanted to show you an easy way to tell if you have rubbed your fat into your flour enough. So if you shake your bowl, what happens is all of the small grains of flour go to the bottom, and what comes to the top is any large lumps of fat that you have not yet rubbed in. So it makes it nice and easy to spot that you have not yet rubbed in enough. And I knew I hadn't rubbed in enough yet, but I just wanted to show you how you could tell. If your flour and fat start to stick together in large clumps, then it is time to stop. You don't want to rub this so that it actually starts to stick together. We need it to be able to absorb the water. So again, I'm going to shake this. And although I have some lumps on the top, I can actually feel that now that is not lumps of flour, that is the pastry itself starting to stick together. So I know that I need to stop, and I need to add my water. So I'm just going to wash my hands first. For this amount of flour, you need to add 1 teaspoon of water for every 25 grams of flour. And I've got 400 grams of flour in there, which means I'm going to need 16 teaspoons of water. But I'm not going to stand here and measure 16 teaspoons. What I'm going to do is put in 5 tablespoons, because there are 3 teaspoons in every tablespoon. So 5 tablespoons of water, and then a 6th one, which I know is slightly more than 1 teaspoon for every tablespoon. But I also know this flour, I've been using this bag of flour, and it does seem to be quite dry. So I think it will take that extra little bit of water. Just stir with a knife, and you can see that the mixture starts to form a dough. And if you start with a knife, it just helps to keep your hands a little bit cleaner before you put your hands in. You will have to put your hands in and squeeze this together. You are going to have to squeeze all the way through the dough, or what will happen is you'll just be patting any dry mixture on the outside, making the outside dry, and when you try to roll this, you'll find that the middle of your dough is quite wet. So it has to be kneaded and squeezed in the bowl to make sure that you have an even consistency for your dough. And if you think it is too dry, then you can add more water, hopefully before it forms the ball stage, because once it actually forms a ball, it is quite hard to get any more water in there. So my dough is basically now in one ball. I have all of the mixture from the bowl. So my bowl is clean, and I've got a ball of dough, and I know that I've splashed a bit of flour and pastry on my worktop as I was rubbing in, but I'm just going to knead this a little bit. I can pick up those extra bits of flour, and I don't need to add any flour to my worktop at this stage because the pastry is a good consistency and I'm not rolling it. So I'm just going to knead it a little bit. I've picked up all those extra bits of flour that came out of my bowl, and I now have a dough of pastry that I can divide up and roll out to make whatever I need with it. Okay, I've cut my 400 grams of pastry in half because I'm going to do a pie and I need a top and a bottom. So I would cut it in half if I were going to do a large pie, but I'm actually going to do a couple of smaller pies. So this should be enough to do me 2 small pies. So I'm going to cut it into 2 and then take each piece into 1/3 and 2/3, and the larger piece I'm going to use for the bottoms of the pie dish and the slightly smaller piece for the top. If you are going to do a pie for your exam, then an individual pie always looks better. So as my dish is round, I'm just shaping that into a round, and then same as normal with short crust pastry, roll once away from you and turn the pastry around. So only ever once away from you and give the pastry a turn. And if you think it's starting to stick to the rolling pin, just rub your hand in the flour and rub the top of the pastry. And that way you just get a thin layer of flour on the top. It is important that you only roll once and then turn the pastry. And I actually don't want this pastry to be too thick. And to get it to the thickness that I want, I think I might very well get 3 pies from this amount of pastry. So you really only want your pastry to be 2 to 3 millimeters thick. And to check if you've rolled it big enough, you put your pie dish in the middle, and there should be enough extra pastry around the edges that you can see that will go up the sides of your pie tin. Now, whether this pie tin is large or small, it doesn't matter. The important thing is that you don't pick your pastry up with 2 fingers like this, because it's likely to break. So you can put your fingers underneath the pastry and spread them to support your pastry and pick it up. If you struggle to do that, if you've got a larger piece of pastry, you can put your rolling pin in the middle, fold the pastry over, and then pick it up and put it over the tin. What's important with your pie is that you then fold the pastry inside the tin. What you don't want to do, I'll turn the pastry this way so that you can see a bit more easily. What you don't want to do with this is just push down so that you're stretching your pastry. You need to lift your pastry and make sure that it is flat around the edge or the bottom of your tin. And that is a huge amount of pastry for that size of tin, but never mind. I'm just folding the pastry back, but I'm not going to roll that off yet. I'm going to take one of the smaller pieces to now roll out for the lid, and it helps with your pie if you have the base and the lid done at the same time. So I am just going to make sure that this piece of pastry is going to be big enough to meet the base pastry in the tin. So because it's small, I can pick it up. The alternative way to do it would be to put a second ring on the top, and again, you don't want your pastry to be too thick. It's got to be thick enough to hold together, but not so thick that it's going to take a long time to cook. So I have a base and a lid that is going to fit. Before I do anything else to this pastry, I'm just going to damp the edges. I need to have the edges damped, otherwise the pastry lid will not fit on the top. And I'm going to add some of the mince and onions that I cooked earlier. Now, if I'd done this the same day, unfortunately I couldn't finish this pie off on the same day, I would be draining out some of the gravy that is in this mince and onions, but as I've had to leave this and put the filling in a second day, it means I can pack a good load of filling into the pie, but it does also mean that there will be slightly more gravy in there than I would like. So once your pie is full, pick your lid up put it on the top and just press inside the pie dish. You need to make your seal inside the pie dish, and then you can press over the edges, but make sure it is sealed inside first. You can roll this off with a rolling pin, but because I've got a domed filling there, I want to make sure that I'm not going to be losing any of that filling, so I'm just going to cut the excess pastry away from the edge of the dish with the back of a knife. So just cut your excess pastry off, and that can be re-rolled. And then, despite the fact that this is in a fluted dish, I'm just going to flute the edges. And what I would do is I would push down with one finger, finger and thumb, and pinch together. I just want to make sure that this has a really good seal to the pastry and that it follows the line of the tin. So I'm going to go all the way round, just pressing in each little indentation of the tin and pinching to make sure that the pastry is completely sealed around the outside, because what I don't want to happen is extra gravy to be bubbling up. To allow gravy to escape, just going to make a couple of slits in the top, pop that one onto a baking tray, and when I have all the pies made, I will glaze them with egg. And because the filling is already cooked, I'm going to put these into a hot oven. So gas mark 6, 180 degrees, and this size pie should only take about 20 minutes to cook. Before I put these in the oven, I'm just going to show you how to make pastry leaves or tassels. You need to roll your pastry scraps out very thin, because you're going to put an extra layer of pastry on top of what you've already made. If you make it too thick, then the pastry leaves or tassels will not have cooked before some of the other pastry starts to get too dark. So I rolled the pastry out into a long strip. This thin one that I've cut, I'm going to turn into leaves. And to turn it into leaves, what you do is you cut it into diamond shapes. So you just cut your pastry through to make diamonds for your pastry leaves. And if you have time, then you can mark the leaves with your knife to put the veins in. So you just mark down the middle, and then a couple of times, being careful not to cut through, but just to give some indentations down the side to help them look a bit more like leaves. The tassel, it's a slightly wider strip of pastry to make the tassel. And what you do for this is along one edge, just trim the edges off, and then along one edge you actually cut the pastry almost to the bottom, and you work all your way along as big as you want the tassel to be. So work your way along, just cutting a couple of millimeters thick each time, so that you have the start of your pastry tassel. And to roll this up, I'll do the whole thing, but you start at one end and you just roll, and where it isn't cut, if I just make this one this long, is the edge that you rolled, and when you get to the end of that, you pinch that together and your pastry, individual bits of pastry, should open up So you have your tassel effect. And that can also be used to decorate a pie. That looks better sometimes on a bigger pie. I think that will be too big for the little pies that I've done, and it will stand up. So I think that's possibly going to be a bit too big for the little pies that I've done, but I will put some leaves on. Okay, the meat pies with their little decoration have been in the oven for 20 to 25 minutes, and you can serve them in the dish like that if you wish, with some vegetables and some potatoes, or if they are able to, you can get them out. That's rather hot. I'm leaving the base on that one simply because it is quite hot, and this way we can see that the pastry all the way round is nice and golden brown, so that looks better if you are presenting this for an exam. And if I can just get the bottom off, you can then see that the bottom is cooked as well. So on a plate with vegetables and potatoes, a small sauce, little pot of gravy as well, and you've got an individual pie to serve for your exam.